RSA offers business-driven security solutions that provide organizations with a unified approach to managing digital risk that hinges on integrated visibility, automated insights, and coordinated actions. RSA solutions are designed to effectively detect and respond to advanced attacks, manage user access control, and reduce business risk, fraud, and cybercrime. RSA protects millions of users around the world and helps more than 90% of the Fortune 500 companies thrive and continuously adapt to transformational change. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/RSA Security.
Welcome back to Security and Compliance Weekly. Our second segment today, we're actually going to talk security and compliance news. We're, in theory, a weekly show that does that, but too often our interviews are so intriguing that we just spill into the second segment. So I think we're mostly talking news of the week, but if we spill over and double back on something that's slightly older, I hope you'll forgive us. Before we jump into the news, though, we do have a couple announcements. First, join us at InfoSec World 2020, which is now June 22nd through 24th and is a fully virtual event. Security Weekly listeners can save 15% off the InfoSec World main conference or World Pass. To get the discount, go to securityweekly.com/ISW 2020, click the registration button, and you'll be set. Also, as long as you're on the website, you can join our Security Weekly mailing list and receive your invite to our community Discord server, where we've been having fun chatting as we're talking to our guests today. You can get there by going to securityweekly.com/subscribe, click on the button, join the list. All right, let's talk some news. Anybody have a burning desire or a favorite article they want to start off with?
No medical news. No burning desires.
Medical news. No. All right. No burning desires.
I do want to talk about the article.
How long have you had that? How long have you had that burning sensation, Jeff?
Well, yeah, similar. No, I wanted to talk about your DARPA article about hackers breaking hardware.
Sure.
And I think that's a fantastic. I mean, it's a fun topic. I'm not saying it's the best or whatever, but I think it's a great fun topic. I mean, that goes along with the Hackasat, and that they're doing it at DEF CON safe mode. Scott's wearing the DEF CON shirt, so that reminded me of that. And there's, I think it's a great idea. So I just wanted to talk about that for a couple seconds. What do you guys think?
Well, it's interesting because they're calling in SYNAC, right? And that's kind of the crowdsourced pen tester hacker community. And so you've got DARPA, but they're working with a commercial company to actually help with some of this. I found it a little interesting. Maybe these resources aren't in the federal government anymore and they need to go to an external entity. I mean, we know SYNAC's got a lot of good hackers that are part of that community. I just figured they would have done some of this work themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting you picked up on that, Matt, because the disturbing irony to me is the government, which is where InfoSec started and used to live and was the only organization that really worried about it, at a macro level in generations past, is now seeking help from the private sector. I'm sorry. Yeah, I said it right. The private sector to get help with doing security, where we used to have it in-house when we were DoD, but somehow we lost it, and now we're going out to the private sector to get it back. And having been on both sides of the world, I don't want to say I'm sad about it, but I'm a little bit sad. But it's ironic, if nothing else.
Well, it's almost concerning to me in some respects, Jeff, is because you would expect some of the expertise to be in our federal government still, right? We have a country to protect and defend, and therefore we should have some of those skill sets and resources internally. Maybe they don't exist in DARPA anymore, but to your point, we don't necessarily want to rely 100% on the private sector to help us defend our country. We've got to have some of those skill sets and those capabilities still within our federal government somewhere.
It's very difficult. The federal government has actually had a real problem. Scott and I are actually helping out. We helped out a friend of ours with sort of a master's level or PhD level project on cybersecurity talent management in the military. So it's just the military, not the entire federal government. Sorry, but it's a massive issue, and it eventually ended up, so far at least, with us being on with a whole group of very high-ranking officers in various branches of the armed services talking about how to attract people that are cybersecurity experts into the military or to work with the military, and it's tough. It's very tough.
Well, we first saw the hacker community interfacing with DARPA when Mudge came over and brought up the fast track program, right?
Cyber fast track.
Yeah, the cyber fast track. So this really isn't too far out of the question. My question is why are they only earning up to $25K for bugs, right? So in the article, it says that DARPA is turning the hardware over to elite white hat hackers that can earn up to $25K for bugs that they find. Why is it only $25K? Do they not value the research? Right? Because, because a lot of the bug bounty research that is put in, there's a lot of time that goes into this and a lot of skill with just the right people, right? Why is it only 25K? Shouldn't it be like 75 to 100K up to?
I think that some companies do that the large numbers you're talking about. Honestly, we should probably grab Casey Ellis, but he's in Australia right now. He was the CEO of Bug Crowd. He's a good friend. But
he's on our queue to bring on and talk at some point. We just have to nail a date down with him. I was thinking about Katie Mo too. At some point we should bring her on as well.
Oh God, yeah, she'd have a great time.
Yep.
But it's 25K is a good starting factor. I think, Scott, if they find big ones, they'll probably combine awards or give them different, from different lines of the awards. So they'll get two 25K awards to get 50K type of thing. It's my guess.
Yeah, but that just muddles.
I don't have that for sure.
Yeah, but that just not only muddies the charge code, but it also makes it more difficult for cores and COTARs to be able to say, yes, this qualifies, yes, this doesn't qualify. Has
nothing to do with them.
You're using government jargon, Scott.
Sorry. Contracting officers, right? Who are the gatekeepers for contracts. Sorry about that. I said cores and COTARs, right? Contracting officers representative, contracting officers, technical representative, right?
Yeah, but this has nothing to do with them. This is outside the government contracting world. This is, this is not outside the government contracting world, sorry, but this is a specific contract with a commercial organization, and the commercial organization are the ones that are administering the money. DARPA is not.
So if you're saying that DARPA is turning the money over to SINAC, right, and then SINAC is the one who's doing the administering, right? I'd really be interested to see what the clipping levels for the vulnerabilities are, right?
There's probably
what identifies
a chart.
What.
Typically, there's a chart, and it says if you get a something in this module, you get $5,000. If you get something in this module, you get $500 in a T-shirt, whatever. And so they have different modules and different types of vulnerabilities. And there's think of it like an actuarial table. If you've got life insurance or health and safety insurance, whatever, and you lose a finger, you get $1,000. You lose the thumb, you get $10,000. They've got a similar chart for what types of vulnerabilities, where the vulnerability is, the exploitability, and the extent of the vulnerability, how dangerous it is, and they all have numbers and dollar values associated with them, I would assume. Sorry.
Yep, they will. Yeah, different levels. You're right. So, Jeff, your increasing threats to data privacy and security during the pandemic leads into the, I think, 8 ransomware stories over the past week and a half to 2 weeks, right?
Right.
So, look, what you've seen, and we knew this, right? We knew this was instinctively going to happen. We've seen various aspects of phishing attacks going up, but what we're seeing is a lot of ransomware attacks targeting a lot of different places. A couple of them are universities, a law firm. You've got, movie stars and public figures getting ransomware attacks. I mean, the rise of ransomware during this pandemic has been just absolutely crazy. And I only went back the last week and a half or so to pull those 8 stories. This is what happens when you disrupt what people think is normal in some respects, right? You take a bunch of people, you put them at home, maybe without the security mechanisms. Next thing you know, some of these devices are getting compromised. Now we get these huge ransomware attacks. This is the shift in risk that I think we talked a little bit about. We didn't get as deep as I wanted to because RSA has some fraud capabilities. They have some identity access capabilities. What I think's happening is the shift to remote work is also shifting where these threats are going to come in. And I think what we used to think of as our data center controls maybe aren't as important right now as it is around some of the people, some of the phishing email, and some of these other attacks that are happening outside of where our normal security controls would be.
Well, if you tie all that together with the two other articles that I put up, which I don't know why 80% is the number du jour, but one article, 80% of hacking related breaches leveraged compromised credentials, and the other one, nearly 80% of companies experienced a cloud data breach in the past 18 months. I mean, you tie all this together, and I'm seeing the bad guys are being opportunistic. There's new or more attack surfaces, like we said in the previous segment. It's not like there's new risk. There's just more exploitation and more opportunities to exploit the existing threats and vulnerabilities that are out there, which increases the risk. And I don't see it getting better in the near term. And I really keep thinking, I said it in the first segment, I almost want to say I told you so to all the companies out there that have been running around trying to avoid doing the basics, which things like PCI requires you to do, and exchanging that for whatever. And now it's all catching up to them. I mean, we talk about all this advanced fancy stuff, and yet most companies are still falling to silly, I use the term loosely and not unsympathetically, but they're falling to silly things like ransomware and compromised credentials, and the credentials are compromised because they're weak, they're default, they're shared, they're violating all the basic norms that we've been preaching for 25, 30 years. Don't do that. And yet we still do that.
We talked a few weeks back with Mike Lloyd from Red Seal, and we were comparing the pandemic to security, and it boils down to the same thing. It's basic hygiene. From the way you prevent the spread of COVID-19 is you wash your hands, you do the right basic hygiene kind of stuff, and you'll be fine. The same thing for security. And here we have a lot of examples where basic hygiene is not being implemented, and now you're susceptible to all these common attacks that are just on the increase and on the rise. I think the challenge, I've said this for years, everybody was chasing the shiny object. Let me go build out my advanced security operations center and put all these tools in there and build my single pane of glass. And we forgot about some of the other basic security controls that needed to be in place to make the SOC work better, but everybody went and chased after this advanced SOC concept. And now, what's on my network that my advanced SOC is collecting data on? Outside of my data center assets, everybody else is gone. How am I doing my insider threat detection effectively today in a remote workforce environment? It's hard. And so you're blind to half of these attacks that are going on.
Right.
How do you really feel?
Well, I almost brought it up in the last segment, because you mentioned the SOC, and I would be interested in seeing a study that compares. We slice and dice the market so many different ways, but just companies that have a SOC, companies that don't have a SOC, which very loosely, is roughly equivalent to more mature security programs and less mature security programs. But I would love to see. The data that we're collecting, 80% of companies fall to this, 90% of companies fall to that, the cloud breaches, all that. I would love to see all that data separated between companies that have a SOC and don't have a SOC, especially the things like, compromised weak credentials, the basic blocking and tackling. Are the companies that have SOCs doing better on the basics, or are they relying on what they perceive to be somebody else has got this for us so I can do what we want? Or are the companies that don't have a SOC being more self-reliant and doing more of the basics because they have to, because they don't have that entity over there doing the security for them? I think it would be an interesting study. I don't know who would do it. Maybe it's been done, but I would love to see those numbers.
Yeah, I don't know that it's been done in that light, but it would be interesting because, again, where are your investments falling? I've never said that we're not spending enough on security in general, because maybe we are, maybe we aren't. My question has always been, are we spending it on the right things? Are we off chasing the shiny new technologies and forgetting about some of the basic stuff that needs to be done? And that's what I'd like to see, is how we're spending across these categories, and who's doing well and who's not.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna throw something in the mix there, and that's that I think that a good 60 to 80% of security is actually IT and system administration, because the basics for all of these things, from configuration management, asset inventory, change management, all of these things are at least assisted, if not enabled and possible, because of good IT and IT practices, system administration practices. Call it what you will, you get the idea. And so while we spend in security shiny point solution budget money, we're starving system administrators of the ability to do the right thing the right way. And honestly, we starve security because of that. We starve InfoSec, the SOC, all of these people from the information they need to do their jobs. Then we buy another system to collect information we should have already had. And it's crazy.
Josh,
I agree.
Hold on, Scott. I agree and disagree with you, Josh. I agree with your conclusion that 80% of security is in IT, 60 or 80%, whatever the numbers you said.
Some large percentage.
I just don't happen to think that by definition is security. I think that's their jobs involve something that is a security related function, but I don't think things like patch management, change management, inventory control, access control, all those basic things, I think that's the blocking and tackling isn't the essence of security, at least in an historical context. The essence of security is the guard standing watch, the monitoring, the detection, the response, the who's watching your network concept. That to me is the essence of security. The defense, to me, security by definition is defense.
Fantastic.
All those other things are security related, but they're not by definition security, in my opinion.
So why are they on security checklists and not IT checklists? Number one. Number two, I absolutely agree with you to a certain extent, but bear with me for a second. Let's say that security, if you're trying to define the word, it's sort of, bear with me, and saying it's the people in the SOC who are standing watch at the gates. I'm totally fine with that. Let's roll with that for a second. If you're standing watch at the gates, part of your job is knowing that the wall is still there. Okay, because if you're standing watch at a gate and there's no wall to your right, the guys, the invading Goths or whatever, the Visigoths, are just gonna be like, we'll be over there. Is that cool? I'm just here for the gate, man. I don't know anything about the wall. Okay, so if the walls aren't there, then there's no point. And if you're in a SOC and you don't have the information that the wall is there, that the firewalls are covering all the ins and outs of your perimeter, if you still have a perimeter, that all of your VPCs are securely locked down, that the information that you require to become and to be a good guard at the gate, a good SOC monitoring analyst, engineer, whatever, comes from IT. So what I'm saying is not that security is part of IT. What I'm saying that the information you required to perform good security comes from IT.
Right. But you're making an analogy for the wall. My question to you is, how do we tell other people that winter is coming? I'm sorry. The wife and I are watching rewatching Game of Thrones, and it's like, what is the singular most important piece of data that is the canary in the coal mine, right? Whether you're monitoring it in a SOC, right, or you've got an MSSP backing you, how can you put your finger on this piece of data is telling us whether or not we have a major issue? right? And it might not be one. And a lot of companies struggle with that.
There's very rarely a single piece of data, and if there is, something's really wrong. But there's very rarely a single piece of data that goes, oh my God, there's a problem. Sometimes, but most of the time, it's the pattern of the data. Most of the time, it's the picture that arises from the data being intertwined and being made usable. It is the moment of satori, which the Japanese call it, which is when you actually understand what's going on, why it happened, what's happening, and what's going to happen. And they're very fleeting moments. By the way, that's part of the definition of satori, is that it's very fleeting. You get it and then it's gone. And you can act on what you knew, but it's fading as you remember it. You have to write down sort of your action items from what you knew and then just perform them, hoping that your memory is correct.
Is satori like I was paying attention to what you said and then I got bored and I started ignoring you? Is that satori?
Yeah, it's a little something like that. It's a little something like that.
That's just me being a jerk. Okay.
Maybe.
There was a comment on the Discord server that I thought was interesting in the context of what we're talking about. They said that there's an element through education that brings the rest of the business into security. And I would agree with that in the context of, and to expand on what I was saying earlier, I think everybody in the organization has a responsibility to do their part in terms of security, whether it's an action or an inaction. And I don't think there's enough of that. I think that's what was either lost or never taught in terms of the private sector in terms of security. I do several talks where the theme at conferences, when I used to go to conferences, that sort of pick up on the theme of, I grew up in a world, in the DoD world, where the organizations were ultra secure, the data was the focus, and everybody understood their role. They understood the rules, the need for rules. They followed them. They were patriotic, whatever. And going out into the private sector, and myself and many others, that aspect of InfoSec seemed to either be lost or never really effectively taught, because the collective we were so enamored with, we need to build a SOC and they'll do it. We need to buy X number of products.
I'm going to challenge you on that. I'm going to challenge you on that, Jeff. Jeff, I'm going to challenge you on that big time.
Do it.
The challenge is that you're talking about government, right? Government is the only business in the world that is allowed to run in the red. Okay. So going on that premise, right? Sales rules the roost in almost every company. If you're not bringing in sales, you're not advancing your bottom line, you're not moving as a business, right? So the constriction, right, that we see from MDAC, RBAC, and the Chinese wall in government, right? And I'm not talking about China and OPM. The restriction that we see is never going to be mirrored in private industry, ever.
No, I agree with that, Scott.
I think there was also a cultural difference, Jeff, in you guys had a really deep security culture in what you were doing. It was part of your mission. That culture may or may not exist on the other side, on the commercial side. Some organizations have it, by the way. Don't get me wrong. But there is a cultural element to security that I think organizations who do it well have in place. It's instilled within the employees. It's instilled within their mission and vision. But if you don't have that, it's like night and day to what you probably had before.
No, I absolutely agree with that, and that's one of the conclusions I draw in one of the variations of the talks I give about, we're not doing, I'm paraphrasing, we're not doing security like we used to do it, but, the idea that it's a culture, it's part of the fabric of the organization. I mean, that was an early lesson that I learned that is never translated well, for whatever reason, into the commercial world. Yes, Scott, it's all money driven. I mean, I like to simplify things. I think in the private sector, companies have two risks: their ability to generate revenue and how much it's going to cost them to stay in business. I think those are ultimately the two risks that commercial companies face. The God
risk. Yeah.
Which is different from the government or the DoD, which is, the notion of national security, protecting citizens domestic or abroad, armed forces or abroad. It's all basically the risk of loss of human life, and you don't put a price tag on that. You do pragmatically, but idealistically, the government does that at whatever the cost, and that's,
insurance companies do that.
And insurance companies make up the difference. Our time is running out. I wanted to give Josh an opportunity, since he put up stories in the wiki. I'd let you pick. I would love you to talk about the law enforcement needing to take a hint from compliance, but I'll let you have the choice, Josh. What story would you like to highlight of yours?
Let's do that one. That's actually a very good one. So I picked some great stories. I'm actually kind of pleased with them. Distributed finance, which is the new word for cryptocurrency finance, which is just so weird, but whatever. But the law enforcement reform should take a cue from compliance by Dave Lafort. And by the way, I just want to call out Cactus on the Discord. Cactus and Lothwin, you've been making some great points. Thank you. But for the article, law enforcement reform taking a hint from compliance, it's basically saying, look, understand what you don't understand and what you don't understand, because it's just built into your frame of reference. And I find it fascinating that we're talking about these things, and they've taken compliance and turned it into something about a very current topic. And it's politics, and we try to stay away from politics. But in terms of law enforcement reform, working with law enforcement to make sure that they're doing things properly and that their purposes are clearly defined. We talk, our little question that we ask every guest is the difference between security and compliance, or where do you stand on security and compliance? I think I got that right. And
Close
so
enough.
Law enforcement is, where do you, to any law enforcement officer, what's your job? I actually had somebody ask me that. I'm a former law enforcement officer myself. What was your job when you were a cop? And I said, well, my job was the enforcement of the law. The way we did it was to protect and serve. Okay. And what do you mean? That's the same thing. I'm like, no, it's not. Your job is to enforce the laws and make people safe. The way you do it is you protect people that need protection, you serve the public, and you do the right thing. And so we need to take law enforcement and compliance and teach each other those things. What's your job? How do you do it? Have a clear definition of purpose, have a clear way of understanding what your job is, and perform that job appropriately and effectively. And I think we have problems with that both in law enforcement and in compliance, to be honest with you.
Well, do you think it's a problem with humanity, society in general?
To a point. God, I'm having a brain fart, but who said it? Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Was that Lincoln?
I think it was Cecil B. DeMille. No, I don't know who said it.
Okay.
Google it, somebody.
So the problem is that you've got and Jeff, you said it yourself in the Discord. It all begins with purpose. You have to have the proper understanding of what you're doing and why. And if you understand those things, you can implement what you're doing properly. You can perform your job properly. And somebody else in Discord said, well, that's a problem because most companies don't teach their people. We give you anti-phishing training. Why do we give you anti-phishing training? And they go, oh, bad things can happen. Well, what do I count in this whole scheme of things? And so we're go ahead.
Go ahead, Josh. No, go ahead.
I mean, we give people power, whether it's somebody gets the key to the office supplies cabinet, or we give them a gun and a badge, and it's the same problem. We have to make sure and have oversight. The whole concept of our government is checks and balances, and the whole concept of our companies and our security and our compliance should be checks and balances. Nobody gets everything. Look in compliance. We segregate duties. We have an accounts payable clerk and accounts receivable clerk. Why? Because we want to make sure that they don't conspire and collude and steal money from the company. We have a check and balance there. Sorry, I can't make it any more interesting than that.
No, that's fine. It was actually written by Lord Action to Bishop Creighton. That line right there, right? And it's funny how that has stood the test of time, with it being passed down from generation to generation.
Well, it's truth. It's a human nature truism and realist, real thing.
And thanks to Lothwin on the Discord server for setting us straight on who said that.
Thank you.
Quote.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Props.
Appreciate it. Lothwin and Cactus
Credit
are
where
killing
credit's
it, man.
due.
Yeah,
they
Lothwin
are.
and Cactus are killing it on the Discord. They're awesome. Thank you guys or gals.
Yeah,
I apologize.
if you haven't had a chance to come and join the Discord with us and be able to talk with us in real time, like you're really missing out because we've got a really great conversation going on over there.
Actually, it's really fun. I run a mechanical keyboard, so I have to keep like hitting I have a foot switch for muting. I have to keep hitting the foot switch. Oh, let me answer that.
You have a foot switch for muting? That's fascinating.
Well, Paul
All right,
has
it's
one
cough
when he
switch.
coughs, so it's okay.
Yeah, it's cough switch.
Yeah, I have a cough switch. I hit it so it blanks out the keyboard sounds and such.
I'm just technology challenged because I hate technology. But that's my
field.
The cross I bear. Well, no, it's a very lucrative field, or it keeps me employed anyway. Anyway, so our time is up. Any of these discussions, I feel like we could go on for hours and hours, and I feel like people enjoy listening to us talk, but I want to be respectful of people's time. So we need to wrap it for the week. Gentlemen, thank you. It was certainly enjoyable to catch up a little bit on the news, and that's usually when we get to riff a little bit, which I think is valuable. So that's it for Security and Compliance Weekly news segment for the week, and tune in next week and find us on the Discord server and look for us on YouTube and engage us. Thank you very much for listening. We are out.